Alex Night Out. A few years ago, my son Alex came home late one night. He was 20 at the time, just old enough to feel invincible like so many young people do. It was one of those nights where you think nothing could possibly go wrong, but I would soon learn how fragile that feeling of safety could be. It was a quiet night. I was already in bed. The house was dark and still, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old house breaking the silence. Then I heard the front door open. At first I thought maybe it was just the wind rattling the door, but no. It was the unmistakable sound of the lock turning and the door slowly creaking open. I sat up in bed, my heart skipping a beat. Who could it be at this hour? I quickly threw on my robe and hurried down the hallway. As I reached the top of the stairs, I could hear soft shuffling like someone was struggling. Panic surged through me. What if someone had broken in? I rushed down the stairs, and as I rounded the corner into the living room, I saw Alex's friend James holding him up. Alex could barely stand. His legs were wobbling beneath him, his clothes wrinkled and stained. He was drunk, no doubt about that. His eyes were half closed, barely aware of his surroundings, and his head lolled to the side as James struggled to keep him upright. James was a tall, muscular young man, someone who looked like he could easily handle the weight of an unsteady friend, but the sight of Alex like that, it broke my heart. James glanced at me, giving me an apologetic smile. "Sorry about this," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Alex had a bit too much to drink." I nodded, my concern for my son overpowering any annoyance I might have felt. "Let's get him to bed," I said softly, stepping forward to help. Together, we managed to get Alex up the stairs, his feet dragging against the floor. He mumbled something incoherent, the words slurred beyond recognition. We finally got him into bed, and I carefully pulled off his shoes. I tucked him in, hoping, praying, that he'd just sleep it off and wake up feeling better. James lingered for a moment, watching Alex with a concerned expression. I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for bringing him home." He gave me a small, tight smile. "No problem. I'll check on him tomorrow." With that, James left. I watched as the front door closed behind him, the night swallowing up his figure. I stood there for a moment, feeling a strange unease that I couldn't quite put into words. The next morning, Alex woke up groggy, rubbing his head and wincing with every movement. He didn't remember much from the night before, just that he'd been out with his friends, had too much to drink, and that James had brought him home. Life moved on, and we didn't dwell on it. I figured it was just a youthful mistake, one of those nights Alex would learn from. But a year later, everything changed. It was an ordinary evening. I was sitting in the living room sipping a cup of tea when the news came on. The anchor's voice was serious, and I could sense that something terrible had happened. "Breaking news tonight. A young man was found dead in his hotel room earlier today," the reporter said, standing outside a dimly lit hotel. My heart sank. The story already felt heavy with dread, but I couldn't look away. The reporter went on, "The victim, whose name has not been released, was reportedly checked into the hotel by a friend last night. Police are now searching for this friend, who is considered a suspect." As the words registered, a chill crept down my spine. Something about it felt familiar. And then the screen flashed to a sketch of the suspect. My blood ran cold. The man in the sketch, it looked almost exactly like James. My heart pounded in my chest. Was it really him? Could James, the friend who brought my son home that night, really be capable of something like this? Without wasting a moment, I grabbed my phone and called Alex. He answered groggily, still half asleep. "Mom, what's up?" he mumbled. "Alex," I said, my voice trembling, "turn on the news, right now." There was silence for a few minutes as he did what I asked. Then he called back. This time his voice was filled with shock. "Mom, what do we do?" "I don't know," I replied, my mind racing. "But we need to call the police. Now." We contacted the police and told them everything we knew about James. Alex explained how James had brought him home drunk that night, how they had been friends for years. The detectives listened carefully, their faces grim. Days turned into weeks, and the story spread across the news. Everyone in our small town was talking about it. The more I learned, the more horrified I became. James hadn't just gotten his friend drunk that night. He had checked him into that hotel only to kill him hours later. The brutality of it, I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could someone Alex had known for so long, someone he trusted, be capable of such evil? One night, a few weeks after the news broke, Alex and I were sitting in the living room. The house was quiet. Alex hadn't been himself since the story came out. He spent most of his days in his room, withdrawn, haunted by the realization that his friend was a murderer. We sat there in silence, the ticking of the clock the only sound. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, do you think I could have been next?" The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I didn't know what to say. The thought had crossed my mind too many times to count, but it was a fear I kept buried. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I don't know, Alex," I said softly. "But you're safe now, and that's what matters." Eventually, the police found James. He had fled to another state and was hiding out in a rundown motel. His capture brought some relief, but it didn't erase the scars he left behind. The trial was long and painful. We learned details that were too horrific to repeat. In the end, James was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But for Alex and me, life would never be the same. To this day, Alex struggles with the memory of his friend, and sometimes I still find myself lying awake at night, wondering just how close we came to losing everything. The abandoned house. Last September, my friends and I decided to go for a night drive. We were bored and looking for a bit of adventure. It was a cold, clear night, and the moonlight made the empty roads feel mysterious. There were 4 of us in the car: Alex, Sam, Jenny, and me. We drove aimlessly, laughing and blasting music, but soon our conversation shifted to ghost stories. I bet someone brought up an old abandoned house on the edge of town. "We should go there," Sam suggested with a mischievous grin. The idea sent a thrill through us, equal parts exciting and terrifying. We all agreed, and Alex, who was driving, turned the car in the direction of the house. As we got closer, the roads became narrower and bumpier. Tall trees lined the path, their branches twisting in the moonlight like gnarled fingers. Finally, we saw it, the abandoned house. It stood at the end of a long gravel driveway surrounded by overgrown bushes and tall, wild grass. The house was large, with broken windows and a sagging roof, looking like it had been empty for years. The headlights cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the house appear even more menacing. We parked the car a little way down the road, not wanting to attract any attention. As we approached the house, the air grew colder and the sound of our footsteps crunching on the gravel felt unnervingly loud. My heart raced, and I could tell my friends were nervous too. The front door, hanging crookedly off its hinges, creaked as Alex pushed it open. We stepped inside. The air was musty and stale, and moonlight streamed through the broken windows, casting long shadows on the dusty floor. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards. We decided to split up to explore. Jenny and I headed upstairs while Alex and Sam stayed on the ground floor. The stairs groaned under our weight, each step echoing through the house. Upstairs, we found old furniture draped in white sheets, broken picture frames, and cobwebs hanging in every corner. It felt as though the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Jenny and I moved from room to room, our flashlights piercing the darkness. In one room, I discovered an old diary lying on a dusty table. I picked it up and opened it, but the pages were too faded to read. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. My heart leapt into my throat. "Alex? Sam?" Jenny called out, but there was no response. We hurried back down the stairs only to find the living room empty. The front door, which had been left open, was now shut. A sense of dread washed over me. Something wasn't right. "Let's find them and get out of here," I whispered, my voice trembling. We searched the house room by room. The kitchen was empty, as was the dining room. Finally, we reached a small storage room at the back of the house. There we found Alex and Sam. They were standing completely still, staring at something on the floor. I followed their gaze and saw what had captured their attention, a trap door. "Did you open it?" I asked. Sam shook his head. "No, it was already open when we got here." A cold draft drifted up from the trap door, sending shivers down my spine. The darkness below seemed to swallow the light from our flashlights. Against my better judgment, we decided to go down. The narrow wooden ladder creaked as we descended into the basement. The air down there was damp and cold, and the walls were lined with shelves full of dusty jars and rusty tools. In the corner, a small flickering light caught our eye. We cautiously approached and found an old lantern hanging from a nail on the wall. It cast a dim glow, barely illuminating the room. Suddenly, we heard footsteps above us. Someone else was in the house. My heart pounded. We quickly switched off our flashlights and stood motionless, listening. The footsteps grew louder, moving closer to the trap door. We held our breath, praying that whoever it was would leave, but the footsteps stopped right above us. Then slowly the trap door began to creak open. A figure appeared at the top of the ladder, silhouetted against the faint light from the living room. It was a man, tall and thin, with wild hair and eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. He began to climb down the ladder, moving with slow, deliberate steps as if he was searching for something. His voice was a low mutter, words we couldn't understand. I could feel my friends trembling beside me. We had to get out, but the only way was past him. Suddenly, the man stopped and turned his head, his eyes locking onto mine. A cold, sinister smile crept across his face as he started walking toward us. Panic surged through us, and we bolted for the ladder. Alex climbed first, followed by Jenny, then me, with Sam bringing up the rear. Just as Sam reached the top, the man grabbed his ankle, yanking him back down. Sam kicked and struggled, and we all pulled with everything we had. Finally, Sam broke free, and we slammed the trapdoor shut, locking it with a rusty bolt. We didn't stop to catch our breath. We raced out of the house, through the front door, and back to the car. Alex started the engine, and the tires screeched as we sped away, not daring to look back. The house quickly disappeared into the darkness behind us. No one spoke during the drive home. We were all too shaken. What had started as a thrilling night drive had turned into a nightmare, one we would never forget. From that night on, we never spoke of the abandoned house again. But every time I pass the edge of town, I can't help but feel a chill run down my spine, and I always drive a little faster, not wanting to be reminded of that terrifying night. If this story kept you on edge, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling content. Stay safe out there.